So, for example, Banu Qurayza, you mentioned Muhammad allowed the killing of, they say 600 odd, a figure that's been plucked from the skies. There weren't even 600 men in that place for Banu Qurayza. What happened with them? They made a treaty to support the state that Muhammad was running. Imagine the United States, Trump does a treaty with Canada.
Oh, man,
I'm sorry, let me make it. Trump makes a treaty with Canada that when England attacks them, Canada will help USA. When England attacked, Canada went with USA. So what would Trump do to them?
I can never predict anything Trump does.
But I think people watching this video will know the point I'm making. But what happened here, when the Meccans came to attack the Muslims in Medina, this Banu Qurayza sided with the Meccans, already outnumbering the Muslims. So when the pagans went back to Mecca, now there has to be a judgment for treason against the state. And this is what happened. I wanted to bear this in mind. The Banu Qurayza leaders, they asked for one of their allies to judge them, not Muhammad. Remember, Muhammad is the state leader here, leader of the state. He, as such, should be judging them. But he gave them what they wished. You want your ally to judge you? No problem, you can have him. And what did Sa'ad bin Mu'adh, who's the one who judged them, what did he use? Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Sir, I understand what you're referencing.
So,
I do.
if you have an issue with what Sa'ad did to the Banu Qurayza, then you have an issue with your Bible.
I don't. Okay. Because
I just want to add a few points. You can respond to these points in a moment. As I said, long time ago, I used to visit a website called Answering Muslims by David Wood.
What's it called?
Answering Muslims by David Wood. And I used to love his arguments in the sense that Christians are very familiar in using it. So every Christian I used to speak to is actually an exact replicative statement from that website. So the statements about, unfortunately, what I've seen from you as well, I don't say you've actually got it from them, reflects, Mia bil Mia, we say in Arabic, like 100% of the material that is found within there. The only problem is, when I used to read that and I wanted to see what the Muslim had to respond, I never found Christians actually reading the response in response to those arguments that are made. So many things you said about historicity and the Prophet's character, all of these issues. So if I were to ask you, okay, did you study, I'm sure you studied a lot because that's where you're coming up from, in the university settings, maybe in a university where these studies are made by academics, or you learned them from books here and there. You mentioned one of the books by C.S. Lewis. Interesting, Christians do read it. I'm not going to ask you. Okay, let's leave it to your knowledge base, whatever you've read. You can correct me if I'm saying something totally unrealistic. Muslims often go to certain things about Christian argument, and they don't bother also to read what the Christians have to respond from their academic exegetes and so on. So if you were to look at some of the materials that is explained, fine. So I would have expected that you have also done the same for the things that you've looked at, because you have made up your mind that you've examined the Quran and the Islam and the Prophet, and you've examined the historicity of the Bible and Jesus and Christianity, and then you found convincing Christianity. So if we were now to go into example by example, I would ask you, for example, okay, what is the basis for you're actually making that claim? Because you found the Muslim scholarly response inadequate, or because the response doesn't exist. So let's give you one example about these issues about the Prophet marrying someone in the battlefield, and you amounted to as a rape. And the example you just highlighted a little bit. Where did you actually study this from, and which scholarly material have you read in response by the Muslims? Then we can continue.
Yes, so Imam, oh man, I'm sorry, I read it out of a book of a commentary of the Quran written by Imam. I'm sorry. I really do wish I was. We all are. And you're right. I think a lot of me is mistaken to think of it as a rape.
No.
But
where have you read and the responses by the Muslims? Because most of my research for Muslim academic thought comes from books that I've read and imams that I've spoken to. So which particular primary sources have you read?
Studied it.
No, which particular books primarily Islamic sources have you read?
Commentaries.
Like?
I don't have them with me. I'm sorry.
No, think about something you've read, because if it's something that's convinced you should have read, is it from, for example, Imam Jabir al-Tabari? You know, he's written a Tafsir al-Tabari, but only part of it is translated in English. So unless you have very good knowledge of Arabic language, you don't. Okay, so it couldn't have been from there. Ibn Kathir is available, but he doesn't mention any of these things that you say that you tend to rape. So it cannot be from there. Baidawi, as far as I know, part of it's translated, it cannot be from there. Zamakhshari, likewise, coming from there. Ar-Razi, not from there. So I can give you all of these names, and you won't find anything that you say you have read is from there. So it cannot be from our primary material. The response by the Muslims, you've read from which scholarly academic sources have you read?
You've got me. I cannot cite my sources.
So, you see, when somebody is convinced, our conviction must come from based on knowledge rather than emotion.
You're right.
I can cry, like some people do you're a passionate individual. You know what? May God make you a strong person, and may God guide you to Islam and make you even stronger. But these are our emotional basis for accepting something, right? We have to have an intellectual basis.
Right.
So rejecting the truth has to be done with evidence.
You're right.
Right. So, for example, if we say the example of so many verses of the Quran you came to know, right? Is it possible that you've read this again in a Thunder Films YouTube videos from Speaker's Corner?
I don't like YouTube.
So okay, good, very good. So where have you read them? Because I'm very much into this subject. I have examined it in depth. So which material sources have you come to know about these things?
Well, I apologize, because you're right. I should not rely on emotion here. I should rely on scholarly articles, and I should rely on real people who have studied what they've said. And I apologize for making it seem like I have studied, because I haven't. You're right.
So what led you then? What did you study?
The one person that I remember their name because I was able to read it in English, and he has a little bit more Americanized name. Nabil Qureshi. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Who was a friend of David Wood once. They were working together, and then he left with his own apologetic ministries. So the material, obviously the same material that I'm talking about. Now, these are materials by Christian apologists to respond to Muslims, right?
Well,
so
it was written by Nabil Qureshi himself, depicting his journey of faith. Correct?
Nabil Qureshi is just like another. If I say, for example, have you heard of a Muslim apologist for, say, Sabir Ali, right? Or have you heard of Muslim apologist called Adnan Rashid?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, fine. So these are Muslims, right, going to tell you about Islam and also respond to Christianity. So to learn about Christianity,